All right, guys. So Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew has wrapped up, which is so sad to me because Skeleton Crew, for those of you who haven't been watching my immediate reactions or my spoiler discussions for the show, for those of you who don't know, Skeleton Crew has easily by far and away become my favorite Star Wars Disney Plus show. It probably is up there for me with Clone Wars in terms of overall Star Wars shows, and Clone Wars to me just has a very, very special place in my heart. But Skeleton Crew was amazing. And I wanted to take a second now that we're about a week separated from the end of Skeleton Crew, to think about what Skeleton Crew did right. And, for me, there hasn't been another Star Wars show that has come out, the live action ones, that has just really captivated me in the same way, which may be shocking to you guys because I know a lot of you love Andor in a very similar way to the level that you guys have been loving Skeleton Crew. And for me, Andor just didn't quite hit that same level. I don't know what it was, honestly, and I'm looking forward to doing, hopefully, a rewatch before Andor Season 2 comes out, because I think that, I may want to revisit, what it was. But I actually just recently was traveling, and on a plane, I watched Andor Season 1, Episode 1 again, and it just didn't have that same captivating feeling. It's great television, you can tell it's great writing, such care is put into all of it, the acting is great, everything like that. It's awesome, it's great. But it just didn't grab me the same way that even a show like Penguin did, for example. So I wanted to just take a look here and see, what did Skeleton Crew do right that other Star Wars shows didn't? And now, the reason I've been setting this up here is simply because this is all just in my opinion, because I know a lot of you will say, well, I think Andor did a lot of things right. And I'm going to say, of course, Andor did a lot of things right. But I want to really examine, it's not about Andor, it's really about Skeleton Crew, although I will touch on things that the other Star Wars Disney Plus shows didn't do for me that Skeleton Crew did, and what Skeleton Crew did right. Because I think Skeleton Crew comes down to two things that I think Skeleton Crew did right, that I think just pulled them to the next level. And I think, within those two things, there are other amazing things that happen in there as well, the other different categories, but I think two particular things stand out to me. So first things first, so let's take a look back at all the other Disney Plus shows quickly, and I just want to talk about reasons and things that I think those shows didn't do that I think Skeleton Crew did do well. So, Mandalorian, right? Mandalorian, and I'm talking about all 3 seasons. I like Mandalorian. I'm not one of those people who hates Mandalorian. I like Mandalorian. That being said, I don't think Mandalorian is without its problems, and you can go all the way back 2020 and 2021, where I did, episode by episode spoiler discussions of Mandalorian Season 2. And yeah, I enjoyed, Mandalorian Season 2, and obviously the last few episodes were great, and Boba Fett was awesome in that show. And Season 1 I thought was good. It was good enough, it was fine, and I didn't like Season 3. But what The Mandalorian for me was missing was consistency of story, right? And to me, I understand each individual episode was sort of meant to be standalone and whatnot. That's totally fine because, some of my favorite shows are sitcoms where you have individual episodes that are, self-contained and whatnot. And sometimes they progress the story forward and sometimes they don't, right? And it doesn't really matter because you're in for the ride. And then, as the season builds on, and especially from the beginning and at the end, you sort of get the sense of where the overarching story is going. There's a couple key differences, though, between why I think sitcoms can get away with this and why Mandalorian it's harder to, right? Because I think Mandalorian seasons just have side quest episodes, right? They don't even feel like standalone episodes. They feel like side quest episodes. Even the Mandalorian episode in particular, the most egregious one to me was the one in the Book of Boba Fett, which we'll talk about in just a second, where he's on Tatooine and he's like, I need a new ship. And she's like, go get the part and then come back with the part and you get your new ship. It feels like a video game, right? And for me, it just wasn't enough. And the reason I think that sitcoms can get away with this is simply because they're longer. Sitcoms have 20 to 25 episodes where you go, we're in for the ride, every single week, we just kind of enjoy what's happening, and then we go. Mandalorian is 8 episodes, and those episodes, by the way, are not hour-long episodes. They're like 40-minute episodes at the most. Some of them 30-minute episodes. That's the thing with these Star Wars Disney Plus shows. The episodes are short. They're very short. And so to say, hey, Mandalorian Season 1, 8 episodes, have fun. And each episode, it's like, each episode to me, and maybe this is wrong of me to think this, but each episode is like 1/8 of the show. And if 3 or 4 of them, I'm like, come on, this is filler. Jack Black episode, Frog Egg episode, Naboo Starfighter episode. Like, what are we doing here? And I think that's super disappointing for me. Again, I like the show. I like the characters. I like overall what they were going for. Not so much in season 3, but it's fine. It's good. But I think that's one thing. The consistency of story is something that was missing. And we'll talk about what the difference is, I think, with Skeleton Crew. And there are a couple episodes in there that I think are more filler-ish. But I'll talk about the reasons why I think it's less, egregious for me in Skeleton Crew. Obi-Wan, again, same thing, consistency of story. They just wandered around for a while, right? And it just didn't feel, they spent time with extraneous subplots, and it just didn't feel like they were having a focused story until they got to the very end. Ahsoka, same thing, actually. Consistency of story. Like, what were they doing to where you have the whole season was building up to this, and basically when you look back on the season of Ahsoka, the first season of Ahsoka, the whole season was them switching places. You start out with them looking for Ezra and Thrawn, and Ahsoka, Sabine, and Hera are just hanging out, or well, I guess Hera didn't switch places, but Ahsoka and Sabine are looking for Ezra and Thrawn are on Peridia, and guess what? By the end of the show, they switch places, and that's it. That's the show. And there are no, particular story reasons for Anakin to show up, even though I love those scenes, but there's no particular story reason for them to show up. So, consistency of story. Book of Boba Fett is going to the other big bucket that I think Skeleton Crew did right that these other shows didn't. The characters were boring, right? The characters were uninteresting. And I think Boba Fett in that Mandalorian episode was awesome. Maybe that character was not translated well into his own show, and maybe he just doesn't work as a lead character. I don't know. Who's to say, right? I liked Tamara Morrison a lot, but it just didn't work out that well. Acolyte, I think, suffered. While I don't think it's as egregious as many people think it is. I don't hate the show. I don't like it particularly well, but that has nothing to do with any, of the actors and all these crazy things that people are saying, just more so the story. And I think that The Acolyte suffers from a little bit of both, right? Uninteresting characters, for the most part. I really like Lee Jung Jae's Soul. Right? He was a really good character. And consistency of story, there just wasn't any, right? I think it suffers from a little bit of both. I really like Manny Jacinto's, I'm already forgetting his name here, Kimir, whatever his name is. And yeah, I mean, there are things to like about the show in my opinion, but it just kind of was missing a bit of both, right? And I'll quickly touch on Andor. I think Andor for me, I'm not going to really include it in this conversation because I acknowledge that Andor, the reason I didn't like Andor as much is just simply personal preference. I just don't think it gravitated towards me, but nothing, like it had a really consistent storyline, consistent everything. It was a very deliberate move to make every 3 episodes one story arc rather, and stuff like that, and the characters were really interesting and stuff. So I just think Andor for me, I like Andor a lot. It's just not quite up there. So for those of you who have been following along with the segment, I think you're going to be able to tell what my 2 big buckets are. What are the 2 things that I think Skeleton Crew did incredibly well that these other shows just weren't able to capitalize on? Number 1, characters. And this is to me, right? To me. Good characters in television, more so than movies. If your television show has characters that you want to watch, you want to be with, you want to spend your time with, you can get away with almost anything. And at the very least, your leash is a lot longer, because that's the reason sitcoms and serialized television television shows with 25 episode seasons and whatnot can get away with decline in quality, because Friends gets worse towards the end, and yes, The Office gets worse towards the end, and Parks and Rec is maybe not as strong. Well, Parks and Rec is pretty solid throughout, but The West Wing gets a little bit worse at the end. But the reason you're still sticking with the show is because the characters they're there, and you feel like you're there, and you feel like you're connected to them, and you could just it's valuable to you in and of itself to spend time with them. That's what Skeleton Crew did right. Wim, Fern, KB, Neil, even watching what Jod was up to, Smee. I enjoyed spending time with these characters. That even if an episode was slower, if the characters were at the forefront of those episodes, and this goes to filler, right? I think episode 6 was a little bit fillerish. Yeah, where they're still stuck on the planet and they escape the giant crab monster and whatever. But you know what the episode did? Was it focused on the characters. It had that quiet moment between Wim and KB that was awesome. It was beautiful. Is episode 6 my favorite favorite episode of the show? No, absolutely not. Probably one of the weaker ones. But that doesn't matter, because to me, what the show did then was say, okay, we understand maybe the plot's not moving forward as much, but let's leverage our characters now. And I think that is, at a certain point, maybe episode 3 or 4, I was like, doesn't matter now. They can be doing crazy things. I'm here for the characters. I'm here to watch the characters because I think that they're awesome, and I'm rooting for them. And that's what leads to moments at the end of the show. Spoilers for I should have said that up front. Spoilers for the for Skeleton Crew. But when Smee gets decapitated, right? Or when Jod is threatening Fern and her mom. I'm like on the edge of my seat, going, what's gonna happen? Don't do that, Jod. Don't do that. And for other shows where you're just not as invested, I'll give Creature Commandos, which is another it was concurrently running with Skeleton Crew, as another show where I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I'm just kind of watching and analyzing it more, as film criticism, whatever that even means, and from my perspective. But just kind of watching and going, yeah, things are happening, and we'll take notes on it, and we'll talk about it, because it just wasn't. I wasn't on board with the characters as much. So number one is characters, right? It's a huge thing. I would say this is like 75% of it. But the other part of it that you guys probably will be able to tell by now is consistency of story. Because to me, sure, good characters. But if your story is just going all over the place and you have random subplots and you have tons of filler episodes and whatnot, the leash is longer. But you can only get away with so much. What I loved, though, is that the show had a consistency of vision where Jon Watts was at the helm and he was like, I got this. There is a story going on here. It's a very simple story at its core about a group of kids getting home, but you have complex characters like Jod. What is Jod? Is he a villain? Is he a Jedi? Is he a Sith? No, he's a corrupted Padawan who is just greedy. Right? And so you have characters with motivations. You have the kids just wanting to go home and looking for adventure. And really, this story remained at the core of the show the entire time. I mean, sure, at some points it is side questing a little bit, for sure. You're going on different planets and stuff like that. But again, you tie that back with the other component of the characters, and you tie this back with the consistency of we need to get home, and there's something weird about At-Aten, right? And you're learning little things about At-Aten every single episode. Like I think in episode 5, or episode 4 where they get to the top of the tower. I think episode 4 when Smee is starting to attack them and they start learning, there's a whole system of Old Republic planets and stuff like that. And then the Mint, learning about the Mint and Tag Rennet and things like that. You're learning about the overarching story every single episode. It's not like, hey kids, like go get this engine part so that you can get off this planet. Not really, right? Usually not so much. And I think that really contributes to what makes Skeleton Crew so special. So again, to me, I think for all the other previous live action Star Wars shows except for Andor, which Andor I admit is more of a personal preference that I like it, but I don't love it. I think that they were all missing either one of character, good characters or characters that endear themselves to you, or consistent storytelling, consistent story, consistent plot, which I hope by explaining what these two things mean to me, that they don't just kind of feel like random vague categories or words or whatnot. But I think that the previous shows were missing one or the other rather, or both. And I think that, I hope that these Star Wars shows can learn from Skeleton Crew, because I think Ahsoka, for example, Ahsoka Season 2, which is, I think after Andor is probably going to be the next Disney Plus show that's coming out from Star Wars, maybe early 2026. I hope Ahsoka can learn from this, because it has all the potential to be that. If Ahsoka can tell a very streamlined story and focuses on the relationships between Ahsoka and Anakin, Force Ghost, whatever, Ahsoka and Sabine, even Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, whatever that might look like. We talked about the rumor that Obi-Wan's going to be in the show, and then the conflict between Ahsoka and Thrawn and the rebels and Thrawn, or the whatever they're called, not rebels at this point. But I think that Ahsoka has the potential to be a very solid show as well. So we'll see. But I wanted to take some time here just to talk about Skeleton Crew, because I think Skeleton Crew, there are a lot of good lessons that can be learned from a show that was as good as this. But what do you think about this, guys? Did you love Skeleton Crew, and what were the reasons that you really enjoyed Skeleton Crew? Let me know in the comments down below.